Okay, students, episode 3 of 10 Days That Unexpectedly Changed America is on the gold rush. Quick overview and then the details of the chapter. The third story, or the third chapter in this book, tells the incredible tale of the largest mass movement of people in world history. Neither the Crusades nor Alexander's expedition to India equal the immigration that took place to California in the late 40s and early 50s. Once the discovery of gold in California had been officially announced by President Polk in his State of the Union message on December the 5th, 1848, the world rushed in, as the chapter said. California became a place that no other country in the world could imitate, with its diversity of race, religion, color, language, government, size, strength, and morals that were introduced into California. America and world history were changed forever by the gold rush, in some ways beneficial and in many ways not beneficial. The basic flow of the chapter begins by telling the story of two men that were instrumental in the discovery of gold in the San Francisco area of California. The first was John Sutter. It gives some detail about his travels and various business interests before he settled down in California in an area near what is today Sacramento, California, trying to conduct business there. He also built a fort, what became known as Sutter's Fort, wanted to expand some of the things that he was doing, and hired a workman by the name of John Marshall to build a sawmill near one of the rivers or creeks that ran through some of his property. And John Marshall, of course, as he was doing that, walking up and down the line of the river where he was building on January the 24th, 1848, gold was discovered. He brought that to John Sutter. A number of tests were applied to it, and sure enough, it proved to be gold. Sutter wanted to keep that a secret, but a man by the name of Sam Brannan, who was a store owner in this area of California, when he found out about the gold rush, he of course spread the news, because he believed, and he was right, that people would flock to this area of California and that he would be able to make a lot of money. Those who came first of all in California, people from that area, did do quite well. The early gold diggers were very successful as the story goes on. Some made money, many did not. And as I mentioned in the introduction, President Polk in 1848, when he mentioned the gold that had been discovered in California, his speech was published in newspapers, and the rush was on. One of the largest mass movements in history. The chapter talks about the routes that the gold rushers took as they traveled from different parts of America and again all over the world as they came to California for the gold rush. It mentions that there were some overseas routes. One would have been from the east coast of America to Central America in Panama, obviously long before the days of the Panama Canal. They had to cross those mountains, then they would board another ship and sail up or north to California. Some simply traveled around the Cape Horn, the tip of South America, went all the way around and made it to California. Overland routes across the United States, some followed those. They were difficult because of weather, disease, starvation that the people could experience, etc. California had become a part of the United States just prior to the gold rush, when the United States had defeated Mexico in the Mexican War. So California was a part of the United States, but this is going to accelerate the process of a number of different concepts or changes that I'll highlight for you. But do notice that when California became a part of the United States prior to the gold rush, it completed what is referred to as manifest destiny, that idea that the United States was bound to stretch from the Atlantic coast to the Pacific coast. So it completed that. The book goes into the fact, as I've already alluded to, that San Francisco becomes the major city as a result of the gold rush. Very cosmopolitan, people from around the world flocked in, very much a melting pot. But it mentions here's the seed to some early American racism, because there was a hierarchy in California in terms of power, political power, and economic power. The Anglos, or whites, tended to want to dominate the situation. They looked down upon, and there was some segregation and laws passed against both Californos, which were basically Mexicans that lived in California prior to the United States acquiring California in the Mexican War, and Chinese were looked down upon as well. The chapter goes on to mention that it's actually the Chinese that have the first immigration restriction placed on them in 1882. So you have that takes place. Other changes that the that the gold rush led to. One would be the building of the Transcontinental Railroad, as you now have Americans living on the West Coast. There was a need for a railroad that traversed America, so that was built. This gold rush, the chapter mentions, transformed the American dream or the American outlook. Well, what's meant by that? The original concept in America, which is still to a certain extent alive today, is what you might call the Puritan view of hard work. That you simply diligently every day work well, you make a living, you become prosperous. Well, this led to a slightly different view of the American dream. This idea of the Puritan work ethic is replaced in some part by the vision of instant wealth. And Americans tend to kind of still conflict with those two different views of wealth and how you get it. The gold rush led to increased business, food and clothing and hardware, tools for the miners, just all sorts of food industries, etc. It just increases business. Levi Strauss, the maker of blue jeans, Levi Blue Jeans, of course, had his origination supplying sturdy clothes for the miners. The gold rush led to the destruction of the environment. Kind of becomes a foretaste of that conflict with business and the American environment that will take place throughout U.S. history. Miners left a mess of just stuff behind as they tore up the land and left debris behind, etc. The most important result of the California gold rush is that it hastened or sped up the process of moving toward the American Civil War, the North against the South over questions of slavery. Well, how did it happen? Just let me trace those events real quickly in conclusion. After the gold rush, population of California increases. California applied for statehood. They wanted to become a free state, no slaves. Led to a debate. How are we going to admit California? That led to a compromise, what was called the Compromise of 1850, and you have division in North and South on what needs to be done with all of this land that we got from Mexico. Northerners symbolized in a bill that didn't pass, but it showed their position by David Wilmot, the so-called Wilmot Proviso, wanted to restrict slavery in any land that we got from Mexico. Now California's applying for statehood. It looks like that's going to happen. So the Compromise of 1850 is passed. It does four main things. California becomes a free state. South loses on that. The rest of the land that we got from Mexico, slavery would be decided based on popular sovereignty. The people would vote in these territories when they are ready for statehood, up or down on slavery. So that's instituted. The slave trade is outlawed in Washington, D.C., and the South is promised a stronger fugitive slave law. A lot on that, but here's the bottom line. The Compromise of 1850 did not work. It did not last very long. And after the Compromise of 1850, because of California statehood question, you see events escalating that lead to the Civil War. The writing of Uncle Tom's Cabin supposedly exposed the evils of slavery. You have a Dred Scott decision that supposedly allows slavery anywhere and everywhere. Kansas-Nebraska Act, all sorts of events take place, but the bottom line argument is that without the gold rush increasing the population of California, the Civil War either would not have taken place or would have taken place much later. That's chapter 3.